program, which consisted of workshops and presentations followed by discussions. And today we are in the last event. A program which in a way summarizes our efforts dedicated to understanding a bit better our role as artists, as cultural workers in a situation which our society faces different kind of crises, be it urban crisis or humanitarian crisis or even a war, which we face today, full-scale war in Ukraine. So I hope this series will bring more understanding to us, to our friends, our colleagues, about our roles, how to act more proactively, not to just react to what happens to us, but somehow to envisage a more proactive role which we could have in the future also, in order to anticipate, and if things happen, to know how to work with the consequences of those situations. So I'm again happy to present Vitalie, our colleague and researcher, who was the main driver of this program of tonight and also of previous editions, which some of you attended, to introduce the speakers and also the program of tonight.
Thank you, Vladimir. As we said, hi, my name is Rada. I will be moderating today. And we have two speakers today, Vitalie Sprînceană and Bojan Djordjev, who I will introduce in a minute. And today we will hear Vitalie first, and then Bojan, and then we will have some moderated questions and then open up to the audience. So you're encouraged to ask any questions about anything that you're curious about. And once we finish with the question part, there will be Puncte and some wine, and you're very welcome to stay and talk, and you will have the chance to ask more questions and continue the discussion. And Vladimir basically already introduced the research project a little bit, but I'll just give some more context. So the research project, in the context of which this series of events takes place, is called Contemporary Art, Popular Culture and Peace Building in Eastern Europe. And we have 3 case studies, one in Moldova, one in Romania, and one in Poland. And what we're trying to find out is how artists and cultural workers are reacting to crises and conflicts in their societies. So we're looking at bottom-up initiatives and bottom-up actions, rather than think of big international organizations that come in with a pre-given program, trying to understand what are local concerns. Having said that, I am very happy to welcome Vitalie Sprînceană, who is a Moldovan sociologist, journalist, and urban activist. He studied political science at the University in Sofia in Bulgaria, and studied philosophy at the Moldovan State University. He also holds a PhD in sociology at George Mason University in the US, and Vitalie is part of Platforma.md, an online platform about progressive politics, ideas, culture, and activism. With Platforma, he is part of an effort to protect the labor rights of workers from various sectors of the economy, believing that all art theory in Belgrade and Amsterdam. He is interested in contemporary playwrights as well as working on interdisciplinary research projects. His research deals with the issue of artistic and cultural heritage of socialism in Serbia and elsewhere, in capitalist economy, and finding artistic and theatrical public formats for Marxist thought. Apart from Belgrade, his works have been presented in Berlin, Amsterdam, New York, Shanghai, Zurich, Zagreb, Rijeka, and Ljubljana, amongst others. And he has shown his works at festivals such as Vitev, Impulse Towns, Mladi Levi, Europalia, Condense, and many others. Bojan is a co-founder of TPH, Teoria Proiectului, Walking Theory, which was an art and theory platform active between 2000 and 2014. He curated the Serbian exhibition See Work Ahead at the 2019 Prague Quadrennial of Performance Design and Space with Mr. Mirkovic and Sinišević, yes? And Liquid Becomings at the European Pavilion at the venue Vistula Ryan Taros in 2024 with a group of co-curators. Earlier today, Bojan conducted a workshop where participants explored notions of the collective body, first practically, and then we had a reflection on it and something took part in this workshop. So, welcome Vitalie and Bojan, and I will start with the presentation. So we can just go like...
I can go, okay.
And,
I should start doing some disclaimers first.
was everything I said?
One of the things that you said is not true.
I lied.
Totally not true. I don't know what is the source of information, but I really, I decided to wait a little bit because it felt great to have a PhD for 4 minutes.
Oh, really?
I don't have one, but it felt great to, like, at least for 4 minutes to be PhD.
Oh my
Vitalie
God.
Sprînceană. I have a master's degree, never finished my PhD, but it felt great.
Okay.
And I want, Christy, this also to be on record. Not I don't claim PhD that I don't have. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's sorry. This is the first disclaimer, and there are several others, but they concern me, and they are not related at all with what you said. One of the disclaimers that I wanted to make is, and I do it out of justice for the comrades that are also part of the struggles that I'm part, is that I've never been, or I'm not a spokesperson for them. I don't talk in their names. I'm just like telling my very subjective perspective, which on the things which can differ from theirs. So it's just like my very subjective opinion. I'm part of several collectives. In no way the opinions that I'll say today are like the opinions of these collectives. The other thing is that some of the things, of course, I decided this presentation in a way to be more of a reflection. I will not talk about things that we're currently involved in, like the struggle for the Republican Stadium, for example, or other current kind of small struggles. I refer mostly to some past efforts, but also this kind of approach is more reflexive. I'm trying to do a bit of reflection, and if some things in hindsight, retrospectively, they seem logical, please understand that they were not at the moment when they were happening. Like there was nothing. Like if now we can speak of a movement, when we gathered the first time, there was no idea whatsoever, plan to do a movement. So things, in a way, these are kind of contaminations that I do voluntarily or involuntarily. Some of them depend on me, some of them not, but I'd like you to be aware of that, because otherwise I'll give you a distorted image of the past, and I don't want to do that. Also, there are some other disclaimers, probably conceptual ones. Like I put transformations of public spaces in Chisinau in post-socialist era, and we can agree what transformation means, public spaces, we can agree what Chisinau means, but I think like with post-socialism or post-socialist era, I would say it's kind of a zombie category, or a category that we kind of feel, it's a residual category. It's just for lack of better term, we say post-socialist, something that comes after socialism. There has been a large discussion in like anthropology, sociology, political theory, political philosophy about what this post-socialist means, what this post means, what socialism meant. Is this, for example, is this post in post-socialist, this is the title of a famous article, is this post from post-socialism equal to post, or is the same post from post-colonial, or from post-modernism? And that's a very interesting discussion that tells you that the way in which we frame the times we're living is very important. And I think I was thinking about better terms, like transition period, but I don't think this is better. It's, although I think it has, like, of course, I'm a leftist, I'm an anarchist, kind of generally anarcho-syndicalist to put it more exactly, and I have a lot of problems with transitions, of course, where I'm criticizing transitology, the science that was supposed to accompany these kind of efforts of ours to move from socialism to capitalism. But also I think transition, or at least for this part of the world, is not in a way enough studied. We still don't understand how it happened. So I'm writing a book about the last Soviet decade. One of the most astounding kind of findings that I kind of have is that transition was inserted into the public discourse not by the World Bank but by Gorbachev, by the party itself that was envisioning a transition. So in a way the Communist Party itself created this opening for whatever came after that, and that's kind of also a very important discussion about understanding the agency of local actors, up to an extent at least. So we still have to discuss what transition means, but it's not in any way, it's not a better term. In some other countries, for example in Romania, they kind of officially declared that their transition ended in 2007 when they joined the European Union. So that was kind of a closure moment. For us, it's still kind of ongoing in a way, which tells you that also there is, I would say, a weakness of local political reflection. Like for us to situate ourselves in global times. Of course, there is. I think there is a Dutch anthropologist, Johannes Fabian, and he wrote a very nice book called Time and the Other, and he shows how one of the tools of colonial domination is putting different peoples in different times, denying to people that are indigenous, denying them the act of living in the same time, arranging or building lines and saying like, we're the avant-garde, you're 20 years behind us, you're 200 years behind us, and so on and so forth. I think one of my crazy theories that I think, for example, that in some respects we're the avant-garde, we're the testing ground for a lot of things. And I told to Max at one point, I think that Transnistria, for example, is a very nice experiment oriented towards the future. Sometimes in the future when you think about a corporation running kind of a region or a country, just think of corporation sheriff and replace it with Apple or whatever, and you'll have like the blueprint for that. So in this sense, I don't think Moldova is backward or whatever. But what I'm saying now is like it's this conceptual difficulties to talk about the present in the language that kind of will make sense, but also situating ourselves. And sometimes we do these acts of self-colonization where we put ourselves like, yeah, but the Germans and the French, they're so ahead, but like in 20 years we'll catch up or whatever. So Of course, I will now move to the subject of my presentation in a way, public spaces in Chisinau. This is, it's in no way an exhaustive or complete kind of list of processes that are happening in public spaces in Chisinau. It's some of, I would say, most important kind of processes which are happening: the degradation of public spaces, privatization of public property, the automobilization of the city or automotivization of the city, the so-called, I don't know if in other cities is the same, but the densification, kind of basically cutting, destroying green spaces or public spaces and building more blocks of flats. The demolition of the architectural heritage of the old city, the exclusion of citizens from decision-making processes, policing of public spaces. To this we can add the gentrification, of course, which is happening, the housing bubbles that are like only in the last 2 years, like the prices in the city for real estate have doubled mostly, and many other things. This is in a way the background in which me and some other people, like in the beginnings of my urban activism, I was part of Oberlicht Association where with Vladimir, like I was active in a way before that, but the beginnings of my very conscious activist activity, to put it this way, are somewhere around the year of 2011, 2012. And it's because I cherish and appreciate a lot this type of exchanges, I also should acknowledge that in a way I was influenced by a lot of good practices that I was reading about. And like, for example, with the next case is the first action that I in a way co-organized with other people, but I was also kind of organizing there. We called it the Sbaro Pizzeria case. It's at the entrance of the central garden, Ștefan cel Mare. There is a trolley bus station. And at that trolley bus station, it's just a trolley bus station, there is nothing kind of spectacular. But at one point, somebody wanted, under the pretext that they would do something, reparation of the bus station, they wanted to do a big pizzeria. Which would cut into the alley of the classics, which is like basically it's the central place in this city. And that happened in December 2012. And 2 months prior, we went with Vladimir to Erevan, and we were talking with activists there, and they told us about the case of Maștoți Park. I hope I pronounce it correctly, I don't know, but they were saying about a fight that they had, and in a way that story impressed me. And again, what you see here is in a way the pinnacle of that development, because in the beginning it was a wonder. I was passing just through the park and then I see a fence, what it shouldn't be. And then we asked the city hall, like, what is this fence? No, I posted on Facebook and this and that, and people start to comment, but what is this fence? We ask the city hall, and the city hall pretends it's nothing there. And then we start to ask more questions, and of course we were lucky in a way because it was end of December, and the media, if like you know what I'm talking about, the media end of December, they don't have subjects because everybody goes into vacation and they're like basically Santa Claus, people are buying gifts, and that's it. And sometimes like the traffic is huge in Chisinau, and that's it. And suddenly there is something interesting, there is an action in the center of the city. And also it helped us that I had the blog, which it doesn't sound very impressive now, but it was very impressive in 2012 because it had some readers, and these people also started to react. And we were able with Vladimir, with other colleagues, to be very creative, to put it this way, and to use some of the things, again, their rhetoric against them. I'm not a conservative, but this is the alley of the classics of the Moldovan literature. And that is very close to Eminescu, which is the biggest thing in Moldovan and Romanian culture. And I remember somebody drew a picture of like Eminescu having a pizza and this and that, and of course that touched them because their electorate, the nationalists, like started to ask like, what is this thing happening? And this is on 26th of December. We organized the protest. There was a lot of media. We just kind of read some kind of declarations. That was a victory for us. And some of the lessons that we learned was, like, I think the first thing that I personally learned from that was you need to have your own voice. It was good that we created a blog specifically for this case, where we uploaded all the information, so documentation, media reports. We were communicating through our voice. We were not letting the media portray us in their way. So we were always having a voice, and that was also a challenge because there were several of us, and the media would go to, and we confronted this many times after that. The media would go to people that are recognizable, and they would say, like, they will look for some one or two faces to say that the protest is led by this or by that. And we're saying, like, no, there's several, everybody with their own voice, and that helped us a lot. Of course, it was still, and I remember it's kind of funny now, but it was back in the era where technology had liberatory potential. It was like in 2011, 12, where like Twitter was this liberation tool. Facebook was like this space of great freedom, and so on and so forth. It's not like now when everybody's kind of scared. But there was this political discourse at a very high level. Like I remember in 2009, Hillary Clinton saying like internet is the kind of the big freedom barrier in a way. And George W. Bush was saying, just imagine if China had internet. Wouldn't that be great, and it would be a flourishing democracy? And now we see that China has internet, and it's not that it's less democracy than the United States, but there is another discussion. So in a way, we use technology also. This is the point that I wanted to make. We use technology. We were very well connected. We use social media, blogs. So it was very easy for us to transmit messages and to bypass the blockade, because kind of they did not want this to scale up, but we were able to do that. This one is probably the most iconic of the protest in which we took part. This is the Cafenea Guguță. The locals probably know about it. A short story. It's a symbolic place for Chisinau that had many names, had many transformations. It used to be at one point, it was a cafeteria, I think, for the nomenclatura, and then they changed it into what in Germany is called milk bar, like a bar with just like dairy products, and then it just became a regular cafeteria. It had many names, Noroc, Skaska. The last name is Guguță, which is this kid character from a book by Spiridon Vangheli. It worked until 2005 or 6, I don't know. Like the funny thing is that although I was very active in talking and fighting for Cafenea Guguță, I never been there to have an ice cream or a coffee or whatever. I saw it only once from the inside when I was allowed by the guardian of this building. I was allowed to enter inside to take some pictures, but have never seen it working. So to cut the story, to make it shorter, at one point we found out in the newspapers, and this is also part of the same Central Park, Grădina Publică Ștefan cel Mare. It's part of the same thing, but from another angle. So it's part of this, and we figured out that back then the main oligarch of the country, Vlad Plahotniuc, he bought the building, and he wanted to do some business center with hotels or with whatever. And again, we didn't start it as a movement. Like Occupy Guguță was created in 2018, but we started to fight for the cafeteria already in 2014, when we found out that supposedly they organized some public consultations and they approved the project. They did it like that. Like they announced it on Tuesday evening, and on Wednesday they had already the consultations. And of course, that kind of goes to what I was saying about the exclusion of citizens from decision-making processes. I think it's a very important thing, although we like to think that we live in a democracy or whatever, but one of the measures of democracy would be like our involvement, our participation in these decision-making processes. And if you think of that, it's a very sorry and sad picture of the so-called Moldovan democracy. Like I don't know, we're told we can decide about our future. Do we vote for Europe or not, like in the last year's referendum? But try to participate in the discussion of your local budget. Like you don't have any power to have a decision or to have a say in that. So what we did was like to argue in the public space that those public consultations were really not public consultations, and we demanded for like consultations to be organized according to the law. And luckily enough, or I don't know, surprisingly enough, in a way, we got them. Like they said, like, yeah, we recognize the administration of the city. We don't know the political configuration. There was an alliance, the so-called Alliance for European Integration. The mayor of Chisinau was from one party, the oligarch was from another country. So we figured out that within this ruling bloc, there were some tensions. And we are sure that they did not listen to us because we were these nice citizens and like, yeah, let's listen to them. But I think they were trying in a way to use our protest or our demands in a game. We don't know what was their game, but then we had a game to make. And our game was to bring as much people in these debates as possible, to bring almost everyone and to talk everywhere about that. So we asked for new consultations. They were organized like several months after that. They gave us the whole documentation, and we go this session. And it was, again, there is a live on the internet, but we realized that they are not organized properly. They're organized just like to, as we say, pentru bifă in Romanian, just to check the mark that it passed, and that's it. And we did a thing that, again, improvisation in the moment. We say like we don't recognize this as legitimate consultations, and we quoted several formal things. There was no one from the city hall, there was no one from any institution that was involved in that. But we realized, we saw there were some city councillors that were defending very actively the project, and we realized that basically the economic power has bought the political power, and the political power was acting not on behalf of the citizens, but on behalf of this real estate interest. So that was one fight. The other fight was they went in court. They tried to force the city to accept and to issue the documentation in court, and we were kind of participating in that too, and that lasted till 2018. And in 2018, several things happened. The results of elections, local elections in Chisinau was cancelled. I don't know, maybe the locals remember this story. Andrei Năstase won the vote, and then they just cancelled the elections. They said like, and a very stupid technicality, which is very difficult to interpret in the way they did. But they did it. Like to put it this way, maybe you don't remember, but electoral agitation is forbidden on the election day. And the candidate said something like he did the live on his phone and said like, people go to voting stations and vote, and nothing. He didn't say vote for me, vote for the candidate, but they interpreted that like he couldn't say go to vote for my counter candidate. It means that he told people to vote for himself. And of course it was stupid, crazy, and illegal or whatever, but they did that. And there was this, and that created some protests, and that happened in May 2018, and in June already there was a session of one of the courts in Chisinau, and they had also a ruling over Guguță. And this kind of channeled a lot of energies, and people started to come in front of this space and to just meet and talk. And that was the beginning of it was called almost immediately Occupy Guguță, but just like we had the name, but it was not, like it lasted for 1 year and something. Like it was not thought as like a movement that will last for that. It was in the beginning, it was like let's meet and do stuff, let's talk, let's use that. Let's create this kind of temporary space, temporary autonomous zone, if you use anarchist language, or like some temporary situation where you could do political education, you can do cultural activism, you can just talk. You create this space where like the logic of capitalism is suspended, and you basically talk about like solidarity, you discuss the political events in the country. We did many events. Yeah, this is one of them. I like this the most, probably. I mentioned, and I'm obliged to mention it because I mentioned already the earlier of the classic writers, and it's only male writers. There is no female writer. There was never, and we did a small performance, to put this way. We emulated the kind of the monuments, and we put some names of famous women, not only writers, and a real woman stayed there for a while. And that, in a way, by far was the most criticized and most kind of created the most heated discussion about our action, because people were saying like, you're attacking the canon and everything, like the literary canon, who are you? Like, you can protest oligarchy or whatever, but you don't touch the saints of the literature. It's one of the pictures of the open councils. This is Rhythm of Resistance. It's also a thing, like Anna is here, she can talk more about that, like unofficial briefings. It's like the ruling party back then had this practice of doing briefings, announcing what measures they want to take, and basically to what policies they want to adopt. And we were mocking them. We're doing unofficial briefings. So basically, in a way, translating what they're saying, unmasking it, but also sometimes proposing real points and real topics on the agendas. I'll skip that because we don't have that much time, and I want to focus on other things. That all these actions were, to put them, like Vladimir introduced in the way, or framed it, reactive things. We reacting to some of the developments and saying, no, we don't want this, or we protest this. And again, like from the start of our conscious kind of activistic activities, we were confronted with that kind of set of questions. And we realized that it's not enough only to say what you're against, but also to have a vision of what you are for, in a way. Because you say, we don't want that, but what do you want? And also we realized that it's very important not only to do that, but also just in case to have, and to try to find or to implement or to kind of create alternative futures, to fight for the future in a way. And here are several examples. Like one of the organizations that I'm part is doing guerrilla gardening in the city. Basically, we're trying several things. First, these are public spaces that are under the threat of being developed by real estate developers. For example, here what you have is like very close to the circus building, this circus square, we call it. And this, what you have in your on your right, this is both a material but also symbolical representation of how the real estate and how the dispossession of public spaces works in Chișinău. So, what we have here is basically just one row of bricks put directly on the ground, so there is no foundation. But through the magical pen of some Chișinău engineer at the land registry, it becomes an unfinished building. And this unfinished building gives the right to the owner to privatize the land beneath it and around it. And that was supposed to be the foundation of a 13-floor kind of living, kind of like block of flats. And what we did, like we went to the prosecutor office and wrote letters, we created a media scandal, but also we used the mechanism of civic budgeting in Chișinău, and basically we proposed to implement a project, project based on that. We wanted to keep the structure, to keep the structure, and on top of this structure to use it and to create a small recreational space, but also a garden. And right now there is a garden there, and it's not any garden, but we're trying to implement there a permaculture design. So the idea, and it's part of another vision, a larger vision of the organization, to do or to make the city edible. We started to do that since like in 2018, I think, and we started to use this concept of the resilient city. But then the pandemics came, and everybody started to talk about resilience, resilient city, and we say although we started to talk about it before it became cool, once the World Bank starts to talk about resilience, it means we need to, in a way, abandon it, because there is no way to compete with the World Bank over this term. So, but it's part of our effort, in a way, to make the city edible, which means to kind of transform the city in a way in which the cities will grow its own food. The inhabitants will have the possibility to know how the food is grown. Also, gardens are great opportunities for political, ecological, and other types of education. They're very nice tools of community organizing, and there are some communities around these places. This is another one at Calea Orheiului. It's part of Poșta Veche. This is kind of the project, but the idea is that Poșta Veche is probably one of, I would say, it's the most marginalized area of the city, with no educational, recreational, cultural infrastructure. We did a survey, like what is the cultural institution that you go most often to in your area, and in Poșta Veche people say like we go to the Petrom gas station. That's the most, like the cultural institution that they are frequenting the most. And we did this like this gazebo, and we're trying to implement a guerrilla gardening project there. Okay. This is a video, but I'll not show you, but it's on YouTube. Basically, at one point, I think, and within the collectives that I'm part of, we think that fighting for the future is also very important, because the future is not decided yet. So we don't want to accept ready-made futures, or to accept that the future is inevitable, and because of that we need to just accept whatever is being sold as a future, and we try to imagine alternative futures, to put it this way. This is how we imagine that the city of Chișinău will look like in 2050. And it's a small animation. It's basically a very green city with people growing their own food, a lot of nature. I'm very much, and my colleagues also are very much impressed by the debates in the 20s and the 30s within the community of Soviet architects. There was this famous debate between urbanists and desurbanists. And the urbanists were saying like, well, building socialist cities that will be as high as possible, and we just have to think how we distribute them either across the land or on this and that. And then the desurbanists had a very nice idea, and I'm inspired very much by Alexander Chayanov. There is a Russian peasant economist from the 20s, and like they were saying like, no, we need to dismantle the cities at all, because, and we know that, like we see now, like cities consume most of the energy, for example. They're responsible for most of the pollution. They suck resources from the surroundings and so on and so forth. So in this way, kind of our animation resembles a little bit that. It's a city that has some buildings but also has a lot of nature, which means like we'll have to demolish some big parts of the city, ideally, but maybe that will happen. Okay, it sounds in a way maybe naive a little bit. How do I move? Okay. And this is another of our attempts. It's a book, also Chisinau in the year 2050. It's just a book where we're trying to use, like, this is a still version of Cafeneaua Guguța, which was transformed in a communal center, and it acts for the benefit of the city. And I'll stop here, just to give Bojan also the opportunity to present, and I don't know, like, if you have any questions for clarifications or whatever, I can answer to them like now, or we can do after Bojan does the presentation. I know, sorry for the presentation being a bit chaotic and a bit unstructured, of course. Okay, Bojan. I was referring, there is a lot of discussion around that. For example, a lot of the interesting, conceptually and architecturally interesting buildings in Chisinau are not recognized at all as part of the heritage. And then there is the way in which the heritage in Chisinau is destroyed, in the sense of like being treated as buildings but not as neighborhoods. And there is also this discussion. I think we need to have a discussion about the past. If I will participate in a couple of referendum, I will vote for keeping the tank, of course. But this is the local community for you to decide.
Thank you, Vitalie. This was so nice as like a basis for some things that I'm going to talk about. I will have to see my watch. Here it is. To keep the track of time, because I have like two, let's say, sections in this presentation. One of them is somehow trying to present some of the things that I have been interested in my artistic research and that have to do with this notion of collective and collective intelligence. And then the second part is somehow applying this collective intelligence into this notion of collective intelligence into actually the events that are happening in Belgrade in the last 8 months. The big student protest and the big social movements. So I am speaking as a citizen, as a participant of these protests, not in any way as like an organizer or an inspirator or anything like that, but as someone who is there as like someone who supports it, as a body count. there as well, someone who observes it, but also someone who can maybe analyze it from like a different perspective based on my experience and my interest in let's say, with my background from performing arts. Today I did, as Rada said, a workshop with some participants from the city that is also related to this notion of collectivity and this intelligence of the collectivity. But I started being interested in the collective, of course, as a theater maker, because theater is inherently a collective act. Also, right when I finished my studies, I, together with colleagues, formed like a collective, like Rada said, walking theory that proved to be some kind of intellectual infrastructure for me and my peers from all the other art schools, trying to somehow compensate for the rigidity of art training and try to somehow locate. We were gathered around this notion of practice that is something that can be both artistic and theoretical, and in a sense intervening. And then at some point I actually started somehow reacting to the environment that was around me. I was at that time splitting my time between Belgrade and Amsterdam. It was the 2010s, and like I somehow, as a reaction to the big economic crisis that provoked many protests in the world at that time. I'm speaking, of course, about the Arab Spring, but all the others, like the Occupy movement, like the Gezi Park, like the protests that were happening in Ukraine and everywhere else, Sao Paulo. I was trying to somehow figure out what these masses are and what these collectives are, and how these collectives think, and how these collectives think with their bodies, which is something that is somehow related to the theater and the performance. One of the things that was somehow like an immediate reaction to this big economic crisis in 2008 was this huge popularity of Marxism again, or Marxist literature. And I tried to somehow see how this notion of collective reading can contribute in the theater, and what actually do we know about Marxism and how it can be utilized again in understanding the world. Is it relevant still? More than 150 years after, like for example, Communist Manifesto, and how does a bourgeois setting, like a typical bourgeois setting, like a theater, react to Marxism? So I decided to organize a dinner, a very bourgeois dinner, inspired by Louis Buñuel's film, of course, The Discreet Charm of Marxism, where actually I organized some kind of restaurant type of, or like a bourgeois dinner type of situation for I think maximum 32 people, from 24 to 32 people, where I behaved as a host, and where I served 6-course dinner, but instead of food I served quotes from various Marxist literature, with like centerpiece, or the roast of the dinner, being of course the Communist Manifesto, and then all the other ingredients around were just like reflections of the Communist Manifesto from like the 19th century all the way till the 21st century. Here is the menu. I try to incorporate all the kind of like writers, assign them different positions in the logic of the 6-course menu. There are writers, but there are like Marxist writers and like philosophers, but also like artists and like popular artists, like for example Chico Buarque de Holanda, a famous Brazilian cantautor who was also let's say, left-leaning in his music, also like a famous Turkish poet, Nazım Hikmetran, and then all the other usual suspects, Zizek, etc. But also like some completely anonymous students that counteract the fatness of the cheese with like something sour. These are people from Belgrade who were writing something, and I quoted them. So instead of food, people were served this kind of like paper dishes, very much designed, folded into small origami things. But as I was referring to Buñuel, I also had real food and real drinks, but in the library. And so this is one of these theatrical events where actually the audience is the main performer, and fueled by their curiosity and wine and real food, we spent some kind of 2.5 hours in this kind of like structured reading group session, where in the first, let's say, half an hour, 45 minutes, they're able to like pick and choose their food, get acquainted to who is sitting in front of them. Everything is very much playful and, as you see, like designed. There is a lot of this kind of paper stationery. Everything is handmade. It's fun to do it. And then at a certain point, I, as a host, roll out the roast with like a big guillotine cutter, and I slice up and divide up like the best of Communist Manifesto, and then the audience is actually expected to read aloud and then see where the comments happen, what kind of who comments what. And it is a very, at that time I was very interested in this situation where I, as a theater director, do behave as some kind of a host who sets up a certain rules of the game, a certain playground, and then as soon as possible somehow leaves or stays very much in the background and let the people somehow do it. It proved very popular. People enjoyed attending this piece and performing in this piece. At some points when I was doing it, for example, in Brussels, people actually took over the piece. I was not able to finish it. They were discussing their own problems. It happened after one of these terrorist attacks in Brussels, so no one cared about Marxism, but they somehow hijacked the opportunity, and like, you know, the brought them, the theater brought them together to sort of discuss their own stories, and this somehow interested me as a maker how to go further in this strategy of forming and stirring around this kind of collective intelligence and this temporary collective, which is from the, let's say, in the last 150 years, it's like a dream of every theater maker or theater director to, you know, have this kind of collective that is somehow maybe repeating like the importance of the role of theater that it had, I don't know, thousands of years ago with its sources in, I don't know, social ritual or like the politics in Greece, etc., etc. And I tried in like the next phase of this research to again focus on this idea of collective reading, but to try to question the notion of reading. What is reading and what is like forming this collective? And I decided to do a piece that is going to actually be based on non-verbal, but like bodily, physical, and more specifically choreographic reading of some of these very famous and very popular at that time on all the blogs, as Vitalie said, Yugoslav monuments from the Second World War. They were done from the early 60s until the early 80s. They were part of this commemoration of the of the partisans and the people and the peasants and everyone who fought in the Second World War on the anti-fascist side. And what is important about them is that they are never to like a one person or a leader or like an individual, but they are the monuments to this collective, whether it's like this collective of martyrs or collective of fighters or a collective that won in the end. And what is also important at that time, it was very important for Yugoslavia to distance itself from the Soviet Union and from the socialist realism, so they were all done in this radical abstraction, sometimes also quite extravagant. And when I visited some of them, and this is what initiated me to think about it, is that they were all done in such a way that actually the only way for you to experience them is to do some kind of parkour through what they offer. It's not only this kind of like statue, but it's working with the environment, with the nature around it. They are somehow staging the landscape, which is usually connected to the battle that took place there, or like the tragedy that took place there. They usually have some kind of like public space or amphitheater around them, so there is literally like a parkour or like a walk or a choreography that you have to do in order to experience them. But then there is also something that is more specific, like whether you can enter them or not, or whether you can climb on some of them or not. What is really your concrete bodily experience with them? This is something that was very important for me, so I chose 3 of them. This one that commemorates that commemorates the first liberated territory from Nazism in Europe in September and October of 1941. This one, and it's in Bosnia. This one is in Serbia, and this one is also in Bosnia. This is a quite famous one. And I spent several days on the locations with choreographers where we sort of researched these monuments and them as this kind of partitura, as this kind of scores for collective dance, and then we try to somehow put it back in the theater in this kind of like completely hygienic white space where like people are sitting in rows, and then try to sort of tell the story and convey this feeling of these monuments. Or this experience, at least, and what is their invitation and what is their proposition. And so my idea was to somehow try to get the audience from this to this. And we used different strategies. There is first this kind of like poetically political introduction that somehow tries to fill this empty space with information that will help people later, that they will activate later when they encounter the documentation of these monuments. Then they are invited to walk around. There are 3 projections of 3 different monuments, and the videos are some kind of parkours that in a way, in the best possible way, can illustrate what these monuments are. And then with each of the videos there is one choreographer that then serves as a guide, as someone who tells a story not about history but about this kind of tries to sort of enliven this sculpture on the spot, and slowly actually draws people into dance through like demonstrations. So it really goes from verbal to like visual to this kind of very haptic, where like you propose a certain choreographical exercise based on like a static problem of the monument. You give a hand, and then a person gives you a hand, or not the first person but the second person, and somehow it all develops into this kind of 100 people dancing. The piece does not have like a formal ending. It ends when it ends, when the people are done. Again, I was very much interested in this notion of this kind of like collective intelligence, but this time this bodily intelligence that is somehow present and that decides like when it is time to rest, when it is time to join, when it is more comfortable for me to stay in the background and observe what is going on, or is this ecstatic moment when everyone is taking their hands and like trying to dance together, something that is very exciting, and how far is exhaustion and how far can we go? And then after that, this is related actually to the workshop that I did today. This colleague of mine, Siniša Ilić, and me came up with this idea of producing this big prop. This one is actually 10 by 10 meters, so it's 100 square meters of textile with like a print on it. That will also serve as some kind of trigger of this movement. So to leave out the entire verbal part of it, like we don't need any kind of instructions, we don't need narrative, we just kind of hand out this material and see what happens. This is what we tried out today in this space. Our textile traveled in this room in many directions, then through the corridor, and then through the window, and it ended up in the schoolyard as well. And working with these kind of materials is really something that somehow gives you a very concrete feeling of what a mass or a crowd is and how it thinks and what kind of messages can it send. If you send an impulse holding this thing, where does it reach? How do you respond to it? How do you make it small? How do you make it big? And I must say I was directly inspired to think about this kind of like less and less verbal mass by a talk by Jodi Dean, who is, you know maybe, yes, she's a professor at some university in the States, and I listened to her and she wrote this book, Crowds and the Party. She was interpreting Elias Canetti, who is a sociologist from the first half of the 20th century and who has this very interesting claim that people in general don't like to be touched in like everyday life. Touch is something that is very intimate, that is, reserved for only like your friends or your loved ones, except in the situation of crowd. In the situation of crowd, touch is something that you actually do not mind and that you somehow like, and in the moments of crowd, you don't even know whether you are breathing or someone else is breathing, or whose hands is which, and these are some precious moments that last for a very short time and that need to be somehow preserved. These moments of, they call it egalitarian discharge, communal discharge, that is somehow always looking for some kind of empowerment and justice. And then they say the role of the party, of the political party, is to extend this moment and to make it into something with the other means. And if we think about it, this is really something that is interesting in these moments of techno parties or drumming or folk dances with rhythm. You really have this kind of crowd that is somehow, you can take it anywhere. It doesn't last for long. And the main question is how to sort of keep it. So this was like a direct inspiration for working with this kind of textiles. This is not a very systematic work at all. I mean, I do this in collaboration with this colleague of mine and friend Siniša Ilić. So we produce a textile. He is very fast in drawing and making these kind of visual elements, and then I am my part of the bargain is more complicated to organize because I need people to come to a workshop to do something with it. But we somehow included it also in several. This piece, the first piece, was actually made in 2017, and it's called Orientation in 100 Revolutions, to somehow try to reflect the 100 years since the October Revolution. And this particular textile comes with this text that I wrote that is actually some kind of trial of systematization of all the uprisings, discontents, revolutions that happened in those last 100 years. And then it had like different destinies. It was exhibited in a shopping mall, but also in like museums, in the streets. This is something that is maybe similar to what we did today. Here, also in this other version, we included it in a theater performance made for Germany. Dr. Auslander, it's like it was a documentary theater piece where we gathered information and like stories from these gastarbeiters, these new gastarbeiters who are actually now going massively to Germany, very highly educated medical doctors and nurses, and basically making the local health system collapse because there's not enough. This is done in like aula of the it's the Anatomy Institute of the medical school. This is the last piece I wanted to mention is I also used there this one of these big textile in combination with the techno music, and the piece is actually about Georgian Soviet mosaics. It's called Politica, or Politics of Colors. But maybe I will speak very briefly because there is this other part that I want to speak about. So maybe later we can talk about it, but I will just sort of skip it. Basically, I found this beautiful mosaic in the center of Tbilisi. It was done in 1977 or 78. And what is interesting is that this kind of abstract, highly abstract mosaic is on the facade of the former School of Political Education. So this kind of sparked my imagination, like what kind of politics do we learn from this mosaic? And I try to somehow make the entire show from it. I of course included all the other mosaics that I found around Tbilisi, and there are many of them. There is of course a lot to do with the Eastern Orthodox iconography and iconophilia. But also what was important for me and analyzing this situation, especially in Georgia, is this notion of abundance, and then communist notion of abundance, and what does it mean, and what does it mean in relation to the mosaic and this decorative art as the lower art, as you also said, Vitalie, in this text, and like how does it reflect people's desires of the people, and how it is completely opposite from the bourgeois aesthetic of minimalism. Less is more, this kind of like chromophobia, where everything that is colorful is automatically Eastern, peasant, gypsy, Oriental, Catholic, everything opposite. Queer, carpets come into it as well. Anyway, so we can talk about that later, but now I want to go to this this kind of collective bodily and cerebral intelligence really taking place right in front of my eyes, or the eyes of the citizens, and really sort of like developing in like real time on the streets with like real bodies. So in Serbia we had a wave of huge students protest, and then that sparked some kind of social movement, social protests, some riots as well, and they have started in first November 2024. Canopy of this railway building in Novi Sad. This is an old railway building from the 60s, but the government has been renovating it, and they did such a shitty job because of corruption and like everything that 5 months after the renovation, the canopy of the station collapsed and killed 15 people, and eventually 16th victim died like several months afterwards. it is like the most busy sort of railway station. Recently, again, they have done this fast railways between Belgrade and Novi Sad in order to extend it all the way to Budapest. It was like a pet project, an iconic project of our current president. So this turned into complete chaos. That the builders' pet project collapsed. There were, of course, immediately protests organized by many different groups, but the most of these protests were also at some point realized as this kind of 15 minutes of blockades of traffic in front of every institutions, and students were very persistent in that. And then at one moment, I think at the end of November, in front of the Faculty of Drama Arts, actually my school, there was an incident. There were several thugs that attacked the students, but actually it turned out that they were actually MPs of the ruling party, like representatives from the local municipality with their names. The students got really scared. They closed themselves into the faculty, and they announced the blockade and had 4 demands. First of which was that the government should publish, persecute, and punish the people responsible for this thing. The others had to do with how do you call it, with punishing these perpetrators and something like that. But this first quite boring and civil and normal demand could never be actually met by the government, because with publishing those papers, probably they would lead directly to the top. It's a very corrupt government. They have really stole a lot of money. People have known about it, but they have been tolerated because they play this kind of a game of, stabilocracy. The European Union supports them for certain reasons. They also flirt with Russia and with China. It's very this kind of a situation that also gives some space also for all kinds of corruption and these kind of things. But this protest, this occupation of the Faculty of Drama Art spread to all the other faculties in 2 state universities in Belgrade and all the other universities in Serbia very fast. Of course, in the previous years, there were many issues that sparked a lot of protest. Namely, one of them is the lithium mine that is supposed to happen somewhere in western Serbia. That would be a complete ecological disaster for many generations to come. And 2 years previously, we had a tragical shooting scene happening in one elementary school where a 13-year-old boy shot something like 10 of his classmates and a teacher in the best school in Belgrade. So it wasn't in some kind of, but really the best school in Belgrade. So the society was somehow electrified. There were teachers' protests going on, and somehow it all somehow exploded. And what is really important and what relates to this topic of mine that I'm interested in is this kind of collective thinking and the collectivity and bodies, and this kind of exploration of the heritage of the left, not only in the sense of material heritage, but this kind of intellectual heritage, is that somehow students rejected all the top-down organizations, and they started to organize in this kind of bottom-up students' assemblies, plenums, and all decisions were made in that way. And they were, so in the beginning they were only getting out of their faculties to block the traffic in the morning, in the time when this accident happened, for like 15 minutes, standing 15 minutes in silence, and then going back. This, of course, provoked a lot of rage from the government, not from the citizens, and our president basically in his daily bulletins, formal and informal on TV, gave like carte blanche to the people who are in a rush to get to drive into students protesting. This was one of the first iconic images from December 2024, where you have this kind of like enraged bully with this angelic student who is so peaceful and so like calm. And this actually, I think, sparked even more the people in Serbia. Like, what is his business that he has to go so fast? Why does he have to like drive his car in this kind of like 15 minutes? Isn't this a tragedy enough of what happened? And this kind of like calmness and readiness to be in this kind of situation. So the next time, in 22nd of December, there was this first call from the students for people to gather and just spend like 15 minutes in silence on one of the squares of Belgrade, and this was really massive. I think it was something like 200,000 people, and this a situation where you actually just stand in the middle of the square in silence for 15 minutes is something that produced some kind of new feeling. I mean, Belgrade has been in protests forever, since I think, since the beginning of the war in Yugoslavia from 1991. There have been protests for various reasons, like literally every year, some very big ones, some very small ones. So there is this repertoire of things that are happening with slogans, with music, sometimes carnivalesque, but never like this. So this was something new that they introduced, these kind of moments of like complete silence, and then also they were very tactical, so they didn't want to have like protests, these huge protests every day or every week, but they were targeting like, certain dates when they could invite people. This was like a second huge protest. This is a rail junction, highway junction in the city, in the center of the city, but it is like a highway that passes through, and this was a 24-hour blockade. And this is really something that sparked again people to participate. And then after this, there is like a series of this kind of events, not only in Belgrade but in Novi Sad, in all the university centers. And what is also important, they have started using these techniques of directional performances, I like to call them. They were walking to the city, so you have a walk of like 90 kilometers from Belgrade to Novi Sad, and then they would have blockades there for some time. And then there were walks to the southern cities and the western cities, and some of these are, like one of them is 140 kilometers, one of them is 250 kilometers. And then, since they saw how this is somehow really getting through the blockade, the media blockade of the government, because people are really seeing them, and there is also this kind of sentimental notion of the liberators, going through the country, and then people would prepare food and everything, for them, and wait for them, and it really served as some kind of like renewal of this political, or not yet political, but societal apathy, that something is going on. There are these young people, these young people who are, you know, like 20 years old, who have nothing to do with like the previous wars or any of the shit, and they are some kind of a hope that is happening. Also, this kind of different phase is this cleanup after all these events, because like one of the major points was that, you know, after all these things, the people would bring food and all these kind of things, there was a cleanup, so everything was left spotless after the blockade, and this also encouraged people. At one point, there was also like a 14 days blockade of the national broadcasting television and radio center, and this was something that is that also somehow it's important to say that whatever, like, the government was reacting non-stop, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a day with opposing, you know, comments or strategies, and basically whatever they did, they sparked even more and more the citizens' rage. There were several cases of people getting like young student girls getting beaten up by like the party thugs, and they were arrested, and the prime minister had to like resign over it because one of the thugs was like a best friend of his son, of course. People running with cars into students, all kinds of things happening. On the biggest event that was scheduled for 15th of March, the government prepared on this main square, they prepared like rock blocks of rock, or these kind of like building blocks on the roofs of the building, in order to make incidents, which were avoided because of the good and strategic behavior of the students who were, how do you call it, these ones that have yellow vests and are some kind of like keepers, wardens or something like that. They were able to stir the students in the people, the citizens, in the right moment from this place, so that these rocks would not hit them. And but actually at that time the government used the sound gun, which also produced like even more and more rage. And then there was this blockade of the television. What is important to say about this happened at Christmas time, and today students are religious, or at least they say it like that. We have in Serbia like 11-15% Muslim minority in the city of Novi Pazar, and they were also included with all which is a big deal in this kind of like nationalist country, and especially country in like post-conflict situation where we had like war with like, you know, Bosnian Muslims and with the Muslims in Albanian Muslims in Kosovo, to somehow include in this public discourse, you know, the Muslim students, their religious practices with fasting. When they went to one of these towns in Serbia, they had like a special catering for the Muslim students, and then in the Easter Sunday, the Muslim students came all the way to Belgrade to be there because the Christian students go to their parents. It also produced this situation with war veterans who were supporting students from the very beginning, who like for the first time publicly apologized for whatever they were doing, and saying how they were manipulated into this kind of religious and ethnic hatred, and how they were ensuring the mothers and fathers of the Muslim students that they are their kids and they're gonna take care of them, and we are all one people. And I already said that. At one point these are one of these walks, and then these walks also continued afterwards in like smaller groups, because they figured out the only way to break with the media blockade is actually, they have this action that is still going on, a student in every village, where they go organized and visit like literally every village that they can. And at one point, at this high point of this protest was that like some form of protest was happening every day in like at least 100 places in Serbia, from like, you know, one old guy going outside in the street in a very small village to this kind of like blockades of like city squares, etc. Yes, they also had this kind of publicity stunts of bicycling into Strasbourg for 20 days and running a super marathon to Brussels for 18 days. Also visiting all the cities and like people waiting for them in like, also in Croatia, which is also a big deal. It's also one of the countries that when we were in war with, the mayor of Budapest also waited for the students. Of course, to be contrary to Orban, who is a friend of our Vučić. I mean, everyone is gathering their points where they can. This didn't produce anything in Europe. Of course, they don't care. They are supporting Vučić, but it produced a big publicity stunt back home and in those European cities where the students were, because of course diaspora was energized. There were like delegations of students coming, I don't know, from Paris to Strasbourg or whatever. So it was also a big good. And then at one point, students, because in this kind of situation, they were like the citizens were looking into students as, you know, the new collective ruler. So and they say, we will do whatever students say. We don't care about parties. We don't care about opposition. We will just follow the students. And then the students said, no, you organize into your like local assemblies of the neighborhoods, and this also worked. So when the students said to the people organized in local assemblies, they started to organize in local assemblies, and these local assemblies were crucial in actually keeping these blockades, several days blockades, alive, because they were very proud with their local assemblies. They all made their like badges and like, you know, signs and tents and cooking things and getting into shifts to keep this entire thing alive. And then in the beginning of July, when only in May students actually asked for elections. Before that, they were just asking for their demands to have the perpetrators of this building process. Only in May they asked for elections, and then they gave this ultimatum until the end of June, which is also a very important religious holiday, day of Saint Vitus. It's so they gave the ultimatum to the government: if they don't announce elections until that day, they will radicalize their movement. And this radicalization is actually what we are living in right now in this last month. So in July, it's this kind of like dispersed blockades that are happening everywhere. Each municipality does their own blockade. They are clashing with police. The police only now started arresting people, then releasing them because people go to the police stations to protest. But like this kind of open and aggressive repression is starting to slowly happen. And the last strategy of the last 2 days is that now the cities, municipalities, neighborhood assemblies are going to the residences of the politicians in front of their houses and making noise and like protesting. So it's like, it's really like there is like this idea: we're going to protest, we're not going to stop, and now by all means necessary something is going on. So yes, I never in my dreams could actually imagine that like this generation of TikTok users and post-ideological people, young people, will organize something like that. And it's also very interesting how they, without any kind of political or ideological declaration, reached for the bottom-up leftist direct democracy methodology, even if it's very tedious, to have this kind of assembly where everyone has a say and where you have to like listen to everyone before you make the decision, and all the decision needs to be unanimous and things like that. It's very slow. They probably lost many opportunities, but also we could see, we the citizens, how a political opinion and political subjectivity is formed, like, you know, in vivo for, you know, like 8 months. First, no politics, and then slowly, yeah, now I think they are thinking about these elections. The government probably will not, I mean, their official stance is they don't want to give the elections until 2027, when they are finishing this Expo project, which is again a new wave of incredible plunder and stealing, where they plan to, you know, have, it's not even like an official big Expo exhibition, but one of those small scale Expo where you actually have some kind of like, it lasts for I think 3 months, and you don't even have these kind of like country pavilions like you do, but they turned it into like a huge real estate development thing, and they plan on building like a new buildings on the watershed, how do you call it, these water sources, which will poison the water for, you know, for generations. So now this is like the next big battle. So yeah, we'll see. That's it for me. A little bit also chaotic because it's really taking place now, and I somehow it's a stretch to connect this with like what I was speaking first about my own work, but I think I look at all of this with like different eyes, because I somehow am interested in these crowds and like mobs and collective behavior and collective intelligence. I think it's too small. It's too small for two of us. So. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she's the moderator, but I actually wanted to ask you a question as audience, and I'm following the Protestant side, of course. And yeah, my question is, you mentioned about your involvement, only as you said, as a body count in a way. So what is the involvement of the artistic community in the protests? Because you're mentioning students, but I'm talking about both the what we call like traditional cultural sector, but also the independent cultural scene.
There is a lot. People are trying to contribute, and I think the main question is, how do you contribute from the position where you are in the country? In our country, we have this kind of strict state institutions like museums, theater with permanent ensembles, etc., and then of course independent artists who cannot strike. Or if there's millions of questions, how do we strike, and does anyone notice if we strike, or do they notice if we do something else and say it's strike? So for the first time in history, almost all Serbian theaters, but all theaters in Belgrade went on like a 7-day strike. And it took them also a long time to organize, but this is also like a positive thing, because they were very careful in studying the laws, and all of a sudden recognized themselves as some workers who also have certain like rights and obligations and things like that, and not just this bohemian artists and idols of the society. And they also realized that they have colleagues in the sector who who are working in their theater but not on permanent contracts, but who are paid per performance. So if there is no performance, they're not paid. So it took them a lot of time to figure out how to do this strike, and they did it for 7 days. And they got their wages cut for that month, for the 7 days that they did not work. The same happened with other institutions in town, like museums, libraries. They also went on a strike, but it was not happening at the same time, exactly because of these. So it is interesting how this kind of situation on this kind of citizen level awakened people to support students to get out of their lethargy to support the change, but also it made people who are employed to reevaluate what this employment means, what is their contribution, and how they were now again constituted as workers, politically constituted as workers, and figured out, oh, but this law about work and strike is not right. There needs to be changes about this. The independent scene tried many things. One of the things was an occupation of a cinema hall in the center of Belgrade, and this was very controversial, but it kept going for 4 or 5 months until yesterday, literally. And this occupation was important because many of these neighborhood assemblies could actually go there and make decisions and do these kinds of things. And also at universities, the students and professors, they could not hold some meetings because of some legal things, so they would have to go to this kind of alternative spaces. One important thing that happened is that the students retook the Student Cultural Center, which is like this kind of legendary institution from like the 70s, and that went into like a serious decline afterwards, and especially in the last 20 years where literally nothing was happening there. So now they're running it literally from I think February. They're running it with programs, etc. And for cultural workers, we are meeting all the time. We are consulting what is happening. Many of colleagues say, I'm completely fine with engaging with my community assembly and not through my, through my craft or professionally. So the actors in the theater shows, they cancel whenever something is happening, something horrible is happening, they cancel, but also they end every performance with this kind of waving of their student cards. In the institutional sector, people also try to somehow, after these strikes, to somehow adjust the programs to what is going on. So like all of a sudden in the project space of Museum of Contemporary Art, there was a student exhibition, which does not happen, but in these cases it was kind of like a gesture. And also in like Museum of Yugoslavia, there was this lucky coincidence about hosting an exhibition from Montenegro about this famous Spanish Civil War veteran who was key person later in supporting students in 1968. So these things are somehow happening, but the repression in the cultural sector where people are employed is huge, because they're changing the boards, they're changing like the artistic directors. They cannot fire anyone, but they can put this kind of like serious pressure. And the independent scene is, whatever we can.
Sorry, to express.
Yeah, of course. But I think these neighborhood assemblies, they saved everything, something that is very simple, where you like find yourself within like the neighborhood.
But in what spaces are taking this place? Like the
outside, like my neighborhood assemblies take place outside, on the square or in the park. We have nice weather now, so we'll see what happens like in the winter. Some of them are like this one are finding in like the cinema, this occupied cinema. So like you showed in front of some place. So yeah.
I have questions, but I think we have like a very inspired audience, so maybe I would suggest we take questions also from the audience first.
Second. Maybe you and then.
Okay. I find this so fascinating in both of your presentations, how there is this really different registry of sensorial connection to the city. So Vitalie, with like this urban gardening and eating the city, like really incorporating it, and also with what you showed, Bojan, a lot of the aspects of really like being physically and like enjoying the cities. So I'm wondering if you can tell about how contemporary cities are kind of withdrawing maybe this enjoyment from us, or encouraging different forms of sensoriality.
Well, it's a very difficult question, and there are many ways of answering it. I would say in this contemporary capitalist city, all these things that you mentioned, but also the political organization, but also the enjoyment of life, everything is taken from us and then being sold as a commodity.
Exactly.
So it's like nature, park, yeah, but cappuccino
Enclosure,
is
yeah.
or enclosure or buying it, or do you want some quiet space? Yeah, that costs you. And in a way, that's the like through this guerrilla gardening, it's not any nature that we're bringing in the city. We're trying to build a nature that is also supportive of our interactions. It's so fulfilling, or it's serving some of our basic needs of like reconnecting with nature. Like now, if you want to escape, as we say, to escape, you live in this kind of crowded city, you want to escape, you have to pay really to make space or to make time to go outside the city, and you have to really pay with. So you have to work in order to be able to pay to enjoy that. And what we want to bring back is this kind of nature that is there, that doesn't cost you money, but it's also actually not something to consume. It's something there to. So this is why this focus on permaculture, nature-based solutions. It's not just monoculture, just like let's cut, as it was like the case several weeks ago in Chisinau. They cut some trees and bushes and they replaced them with lawn, with gazon. It's basically, that's the most stupid. So that might be some nature, but it's not the nature we want. So in this sense, I think this is why I hate contemporary cities. This is why I think that we need to rethink them. This is why like bringing back nature, but not any type of nature, is one of the ways in which we could bring back at least the possibilities. There is no prescribed kind of scenario. So we do these spaces to do that and that. We want to have these spaces where you can do not whatever, in a way, whatever you want. To reconnect with people, with nature, to use that as a way to get to know nature. There are people in Chisinau that don't know how the tomatoes are grown. They have never seen one, where the food is coming from. That's also, we're trying also to bridge this divide between what is called nature and the city, or nature and culture. So I would say that our practice in a way addresses that, in a way directly. There is a very huge, massive political dimension to it, although it doesn't seem. It's also kind of what we call resilience, because we're fighting against the municipal authorities that don't do, like one of the first institutions to resist. That was the so-called spazi verts, which is like green spaces, the one that the institution that takes care of the green spaces in the city. They say that we don't want to have fruit trees in the city because they create dirt, they create compost or whatever. And that's not nice. It's not nice to step on like rotten apples or rotten this and that. So we have to resist that. Of course, we have like people that are not used to see this. Also, people not used to see the commons, like to treat the space as common. So in this sense, like it's we hope that whatever we do is contribution to a larger discussion, but also it's too kind of conducive to, or at least orienting towards also political action. Because it's not only discussion, it's also political action. So this is why we think it's very political, although it might not sound very political. Stop here.
Yeah, I mean, I think back home these ecological issues are becoming more and more important now with this lithium mining that I mentioned, and I think in that sense, I feel that this is something that can unite a lot of people, that can unite, like the leftists and the anti-vaxxers and everyone in this kind of like
Bikers and veterans.
Exactly, bikers and veterans with like students in this kind of making all these kind of alliances in protecting. But people are, I think, only now that they are really inhabiting the city in these protests, where they're really sort of using it and seeing like what is left to be used and what is gone. I think it's going to become more and more. For example, right now the big battle that's happening is that we have in this center of the city, on the new Belgrade side, there is this huge park, the biggest park in Belgrade, of Friendship, where there is a museum of contemporary art. And they decided, out of all the possible locations, to build a natural museum in the park, which means to cut the trees, dig, some more concrete, and not only natural museum in the park, but aquarium as well, right next to the river. So it's again this kind of you don't leave the park as it is and build a natural museum somewhere else, but you need to build a natural museum there to get some money while building it, and things like that, and then charge, for this thing. I mean, it's really ridiculous.
So you can also show the trees that you cut down in the museum.
Or something like that. Yeah, it's like now, literally as we speak, people are organizing one of the actions of these assemblies is to have vigilance in the park, because they're going to come and start cutting.
Okay. I'm also wondering, because as you mentioned, you gave us a lot of examples where the interaction, or most of the interactions that citizens have with government or the city municipality are antagonistic and really negatively framed. How does this affect this connection to also the city space, and how do we prevent this withdrawal to the private sphere in spite of that?
I don't think they are connected in a way, because the withdrawal in the public sphere is happening anyway, and it's the effect of larger forces. It's consumption, it's this consumer capitalism, it's this destruction of the cultural infrastructure that pushes us to consume culture at home. In Chișinău we have in Chișinău we have 3 cinemas. We don't have cinemas outside of Chișinău. We have 3 or 4 theaters outside Chișinău. But also I want to make I didn't talk about it in the presentation, but as we say, we wear many hats. We're activists, but we are also wearing the hat of sometimes participating in debates as regular citizens, not activists, also as experts. And this is why it's important for us to present, we have written some studies about how the city can be resilient. So we put forward also policy proposals. So in a way, we're coming then with whatever we have, and it's not just to say like, yeah, these activists, we know they're crazy, they don't know anything, or they're kind of amateur, but we try also to be active in other kind of spheres where public decisions are being made. Now, with the other issue that you said, I don't know, like Bojan finished with this wonderful kind of paradox that he was not expecting the most political movement of Serbia probably in the last, I don't know how many years, to come from a generation that we think is depoliticized. And now if you look at it, like, because there is sometimes also we have this, I don't know, it's called myopia or how it's called? Yeah, short kind of side. Like, if I was never on Instagram, and I usually am not on Instagram, or on TikTok, I would not see also that there is a politicization there. This social network, there are many discussions, and there is a lot of criticism also about the politicization that is happening on social media, because it's not nuanced. It splits issues in black and white. It's kind of puts people to act as crowd. Do you support it or not? Do you endorse it or not? So it's not very good for reflection, for nuanced discussions. But then there is like, there is a lot of young people there, like subscribed to various Marxist or anarchist or other channels, and they get their politics there. So it means that they have questions, and they look at the formal sphere, they don't find it, and they find it somewhere else. Luckily, the accessibility to technology of foreign languages also helps them. So, in what I think it might be also like this. We think that people retreat in the, but also we don't know why they retreat. I just put it forward as a thesis, like maybe it's because of this consumer capitalism. Also because maybe, like as a sociologist, I pay attention to popular culture. And if you look at popular culture, there is nowhere, you cannot show me like a spectacle or a movie or a TV series where politics is described to be this occupation which is worthy of doing. Everything like politics is dirty, narcotics, corruption, like it doesn't inspire you. Like almost any movie except for the biographies of like Harvey Milk or maybe Gandhi or maybe movies like Pride. But other than that, like look at like House of Cards, for example, or other movies. Like politics is depicted in a way which like it's not worth even like thinking about. So maybe that is the reaction also. So we don't know the causes. Yeah, we see a demobilization of citizenry, which means like less participation. That's a global phenomenon. Less participation in formal institutions. There is this famous book by Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, that he sees that basically even sport clubs don't gather people. Like secularization or religion sociologists were talking about like secularization of the world because people don't go to church. But people don't go to political parties, they don't go to labor unions. So in a way, there is a distrust in formal institutions, in collective action. We don't know the origins, we can see the phenomenon. But we're also seeing signs of collective action being reconfigured and also being recomposed in another way. And I don't know, we've been experimenting, I didn't mention that, but we've been experimenting in occupied groups with some forms of horizontality adopted to the local level. And that was a great experience. Of course, some old-fashioned kind of political organizer will tell you that once you create institutions, that's when you become a serious actor. And I don't know, I'm looking at various examples, like in Zagreb, movements have kind of won the elections in the city, in Barcelona. It's a mixed experience. It's also because that sphere of formal politics is also kind of very complex and it doesn't overlap with the activism. So we still probably have to also adapt to this new way of doing politics. So I don't have a solution to what you said, but I think that we need to give more credit to this generation and to the citizenry that apparently retreated in the private world. Maybe it's not a retreat, maybe just like 2 steps back, and maybe they're waiting.
But maybe it also has to do with the configuration of workspace right now, because this is atomized, and like a lot of to go back to Marx, and because a lot of this kind of political and social engagement
The
came
factory where like
exactly.
hundreds of people
Exactly. So now that we are all in each of us in our own like laptop or like in a small office, there is no possibility to socialize. Like last night, I was talking to Iulie and to Rada. I can't remember when was the last time when I like talked like that with my like peers and like colleagues and just talking after the talk. There is some kind of compartmentalization and this kind of dispersion.
And the traditional institutions are not used to that. Like, how do you organize a labor union of, for example, freelancers?
Yeah.
We still have to think about that because we have
So
the
divided by professional.
divided by professional, by immigrant status. How do you organize like migrant workers? How do you unionize like people that are doing the care work and so on and so forth? Because these are the spaces of the work, but then you cannot penetrate with these institutions. So
But there are some examples, like in the Netherlands, I know like an artist who is actually actively employed by the Union of Undocumented Workers. And he said, I'm not going to be paid by the artist, I'm going to be paid by he's their official artist, makes their, like helps them with like actions, and it's huge thing, it's mostly like domestic workers and like people who are completely undocumented and people trust them with like the keys to their houses to like clean up their shit and all that, and do not trust them to give them any kind of like citizens' rights or things like that. So there are some kind of examples that can be explored. Also, I heard in Argentina or somewhere in like South America, like the union of housekeepers. It's insanely important to have this. I think Laura was telling me something about that. So,
and in Poland, I've heard about like the union of independent artists also. So they're in Poland.
In Poland, yeah.
So they are attempts.
I have too many questions, I'll just not ask any.
Oh, please, come on now. Just something.
I don't know, not really a question, but I find it so interesting. You both spoke also about media, and I find this blockade of the TV station, this is incredible. This doesn't happen often in protests, even of this size. And you spoke also about like this blogosphere in the early 2000s and how this was really instrumental to shaping this counter-narrative to how the protests were also presented. And I was reading recently about these protests in Brazil in, I think it was in 2015, this Movimento Passa Livre, which was a movement to ensure free or cheaper bus fares, I think also mostly for students, and the initial protests were organized by like, these anarchists and like very punky looking kids, and the media was like, oh, look at them, I don't like all these kids, what are they doing? And then the movements became bigger and were joined by more and more groups, amongst others also people who would later become the people who voted for Bolsonaro. And it's super tragic. And as the protests grew bigger, the media immediately had the problem, so okay, we were depicting them in this very negative way, but now all of a sudden this is becoming a really popular movement, so we have to find what is good about this. So I don't know, like the book I'm referring to is If We Burn, by Vincent Bevins, who is
If We Burn.
If We Burn.
Vincent Bevins.
Vincent Bevins, he's an American journalist, and he was looking at this like decade of protests. Yes, I guess.
But mainly Brazil, but with all the others.
But also in the context of, like you mentioned, Tahrir Square,
Gezi,
and so on, and like the Black Lives Matter protest later on, and how like a lot of these movements didn't materialize into political change, even though they were massive. And the disappointment that comes with this. And so he was, So back to the media question, I'm really interested if like, if this is something, or like how do you see like this change of media? Is this something that is happening? Like, is there a change of media narrative, and also like maybe thinking about protests that happened in Moldova? Have there been like switches in how media portrays the protests?
Well, like my anarchist background, I remember one of the first things that I read and I was impressed by that was like, be your media. And then, like, not only like anarchist traditions, but I remember reading about the Polish solidarity movement. There was this like there was this famous saying like, if the government shuts down your publishing houses, create your own publishing houses. If it doesn't give you access to universities, create your own forms of education. So in a way, like, yeah, you could look and say like they're boycotting us and that, but then you could look and say like, okay, but we can replace that. We are the ones that will do our own media. And that kind of has worked. This is why we created this media platform platform. Of course, you see the media, not only the media landscape is changing, but also the interest of the media is changing. When we were in Occupy the Woods, and that was part of the things that were perceived to be progressive, were like assaulted in a way. We're very much liked by the media. In a way, me personally, I'm doing more or less the same, and now it's different because the whole political landscape is changed. The media has other narratives, and but again, it's not something that I want to complain. It was I understood back then when media was interested in us that it's in a way circumstantial because the media was also having this kind of agenda. Now the media has another agenda, and for us it's important to keep our voice, to try to put our voice and our message, bypass the blockades or the ignoring of the media. I don't know how it works. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not successful. But I think media is an important field, and we have to fight for it. But again, I don't want to overemphasize it because there is also this perception that communication is everything. Once you communicate something, as if you are creating the social reality. What I'm like really worried now about with Platforma is that we need to find a kind of, I don't know how to put it, if the government decides tomorrow to suspend it, we're left with nothing because we're just an online platform. We would like to have a physical space, something. We need to, like, we're thinking about, like, our work now is about the physical infrastructure, not some materiality, something on which you can fall back. And that's so, in this sense, I don't know, I don't think media changes the world in a way. Still people change. Structures or political blocks, political alliances, people in it. Yeah, media it's very important, but I wouldn't also overemphasize the role of it.
For me, I think what is fascinating for me with this, and what I think how it sort of works and works successfully is exactly because it involves a lot of this kind of like bodily presence and this kind of like spreading of the news through other means that somehow circumvents the media that is completely corrupted and like totally like complicit with the government. And so I think that there is that this also actually like wakes people up from this kind of like media hypnotism that is now left only to like the people who have no other means of like finding things out. But even with them, these students are attempting to sort of like break through this anesthesia and try to communicate. And like of course the social networks and these Viber and Telegram groups prove crucial. And it's also important there are like certain accounts that I follow. I have no idea where they get the energy, but they're like publishing non-stop, and you can literally navigate your way through the city, through there, like what is going on, where, what is happening. Students said we need to be at this and this hospital to protest, or this and this police station. Now everyone goes there, and then it's really interesting how this kind of thing spreads.
Also, I could say about this protesting the bread, what I noticed when I visit the screen. And I noticed compared to Moldova that, for example, before the Student Cultural Center, I visit with some people also involved in the movement to Museum of Yugoslavia, and they also work, the students, they work in this museum. I, for example, very rarely see in Moldova that somebody works such passionately in state institution. And also I see how I produce the slogans like Samoprava, Plenum, from the beginning of 20th century, and it is is not like something when you should go on to archive or speak somewhere. It's very present in public sphere, these narratives, and you have to what relate, and you feel this tradition, that it's not just this like generation which appeared from nowhere.
Yeah,
In any case, it's people who live inside these symbols, these words, they don't even know what is this samoprava, self-management. But you hear this, you see it somewhere, and you start just to question what it means.
Yes.
And because this I didn't see in Moldova, for example, many other post-Soviet countries, when we like completely ignoring this public sphere, this socialistic experience and heritage, and jump back somewhere to almost feudal or this time. Of course, this is also present in Serbia. You can see this, all these kings and all these narratives about some kind of bourgeois heroes, national heroes. But also, it's go together somehow. And not only in Serbia, I don't know, in Chernigov and Montenegro, I've been in like some small Krajevički, I don't know, some local museums. And for me it was interesting, even if I don't know so much about these local people, but for me it was interesting this tonality that it's many things described through this class conscience or working parliamentary or people educated in the Spanish Civil War and the partisan movementary. And you understand that, okay, it's other way how you can speak about local history also.
It is very different from the Soviet heritage, I must say. Of course, there have been links between it and like, you know, collaboration, especially before the Second World War. But the Second World War is, I think, a very different experience. The fact that this anti-fascist movement was organized by the Communist Party, and that they managed to liberate the country. Of course, the Red Army helped, the Allies helped, but they were the ones who were non-stop fighting and liberating one part of the territory. Like I said, there was this Republic of Urmate in 1941 for 2 months, and then they moved in Bosnia, and then they. So it was, of course, during the Second World War, there was a civil war in Yugoslavia as well. Yugoslavia was occupied by several of these Axis powers. It was split into several zones, and there was this big popular movement led by the Communist Party that was against all these kind of like national splits and all these things. And for Montenegro and for many, for example, for Northern Macedonia, like the moment when the second Yugoslavia was constituted in 1943, this was the moment when they, for example, for Macedonia, this was the moment when they officially had the first time their statehood, their language canonized and these kind of things. And so, in some cases, it's really connected with this struggle in the Second World War. And then, of course, when the Yugoslavia started breaking up, it was important to relativize all that because, you know, the kings were older who held Dubrovnik and who didn't, and, you know, all these kind of things. Whether the Muslims are ex-Serbs or ex-Croats or they appear out of nowhere or whatever, you know, so it's yeah. But I think it's also important, and I have to say that this kind of working with heritage of these words, like samoprava and all that, this is in a way part of my generation's legacy, because we were the ones who were after these nationalistic wars going and looking for, okay, but there must be something that was good about this, because this right now is shit, you know. And so I remember how samoprava was like, you know, this is something that we really worked with to somehow write about it, research and put it back again into, and it also had to do with, you know, like this kind of exoticizing interest from the West. Oh, samoprava, look, self-management, however you call it. So, like these kind of like invitations from, like, you know, the West were also like crucial in forming again this circles of reclaiming the revolutionary heritage. And for me, I'm very much interested in this materialist heritage. But you know, back home you have this kind of like nostalgia in Germany. You have like nostalgia, and it's crap, you know, like this kind of like music and like overall pioneers and all this kind of thing. So
but you have also Yugo-futurism, which is also interesting.
But it's interesting to sort of dig deeper beyond this kind of like layer of like popular culture and what it means, and really see what that is. And there are some important concepts there. It's not Tito who ordered the monuments, because in the first 20 years, like until like 65 or something like that, all the power was spread on like these local councils, the samouprava or self-management actually meant that, you know, like really people from the factories decided what to do with the surplus, whether to build a kindergarten or to use it to reinvest it in this kind of internal competition, or to build like a recreation center or like dormitories in the seaside, you know. It was they were part of the decision process, and all of these monuments that were built, they were built by the local councils, communities, making through this kind of like giving like a small portion of their salary for this to commemorate like whatever these things. So it's very easy to sort of disqualify this. Oh, people build monuments. No, he didn't. It's the people who build it, you know. And then after the 60s, everyone went in some other direction. So I wanted to say that yes, of course, this student didn't appear out of nowhere. When they wanted to find something about this kind of left things, they could find like the magazines that we published, you know, and then you know, maybe we didn't do anything with it, but you know, we have, you know, left something.
So it's important to write.
It's important to write. This is also what I was speaking about, this magazine space. It's a similar place to this. Like my generation was very theoretical, but we couldn't fix anything, you know. And then the next generation came and they made it into this beautiful, you know, like a space. They fixed the heating, they fixed the toilet, they fixed the shit, everything, you know. But you have to have layers, you know, on which to.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I was just saying that Christy's battery is running out with the recording.
And we refuse to talk off camera.
Maybe we can also like conclude this like official part, but we can keep talking. We can get some placenta, something to drink, and you're all welcome also to stay and talk and discuss if you have energy or interest. And very briefly, thank you very much, Oberli, Vladimir, for organizing this, making it possible, Christy for filming. There's also a podcast being produced with interviews with all the 3 international guests who took part in this series, which you can listen to at some point. Thank you, the audience, for being here, for coming.